But surely individuality and originality is not inherently a good thing, though. Because technically speaking, like, you could take, like, just saying hypothetically, like, because obviously Wild Strawberries is like, that's a fantastic movie. It's a beautiful movie, the Bergman film. I think it was Kubrick's second favorite movie, I think I read somewhere. But, like, let's say hypothetically, like, like, who's a bad filmmaker? Like, a really bad one did their own version of it. That would be individuality. That wouldn't necessarily mean it was good. Correct?
No, but yeah. If you look back, if you were to Google online Dan Schneider and a fellow named Bob Grumman, Grumman, in the early 2000s, this guy was a bad poet. He was actually 24 years older than me to the day, ironically. But he was insane. And if there's a few videos left on him, he was one of these nutty people. And he was so proud of himself for writing this doggerel that he called Mathemacoos, which would be something like he would have words in mathematics. So he would have the square root of my hairy asshole is Descartes' finger. and literally he would have the square root symbol, and he'd have on the one side, finger up my ass and Descartes' asshole or whatever it was. And I remember arguing with him. I said, this is just gimmick poetry, Bob. I mean, you're insane. And I mentioned a poet named Wilfred Watson, who was a Canadian poet who did similar mathematical, but he's like, no, he didn't do that. He did poetry with mine is with words. And that's so much of the art world is filled with gimmicks, people who are just hucksters, but even more so people who are stupendously deluded. So no, originality, I've never particularly valued originality. I mean, it can have some good aspects to it, but more often than not, originality shows the flaws of the writer. But most bad art is generic, and most bad art is unoriginal in the sense that cliches, by their very nature, are defined as cliches by just the mathematical, numerical presence of them, the overwhelming presence of them.
Now, that was something I wanted to ask, because I think that's like another fallacy of art. So, follow my logic here. I think in the back of my mind, this is just a mathematical thing. I constantly envision, something happens and then that's popular, right? Mm-hmm. But like, because that's another thing I wanted to bring up was, surely can't something just keep becoming cliche? Like, if I do something new and people copy that, that would be cliche, correct?
Well, cliches, generally speaking, have an emotional attachment. And one of the things that really kills great art is over-emotionalism, melodrama. When we think of bad films, we talk about the tearjerkers. Well, they're melodramas because literally back when the Greeks were doing this stuff, they would have music come up, or well, I shouldn't say maybe the Greeks had it to some extent, but certainly a few hundred years ago when the Elizabethans were around, bad plays would, they need that cue, just like a laugh track. Laugh tracks are bad when it comes to situation comedies on television, because you don't, if the joke works, you don't need to hear ha 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 ha. And the same thing with melodrama. You don't need to have the music. It's a crutch. And so melodrama is a good example of where you don't need to have that prompting. And what it says is you don't trust the audience to know whether it's good nor bad. And bad art, generally speaking, never trusts the audience. If you're trying to be an artist, you always have to write up or make your art for the smartest people out there, for this very reason. 99% of people who have ever lived, who are living today, or who ever will live, and let's be, if I'm being optimistic, maybe it'll be 97 or 98% in a few millennia, will never give a shit about art. So art is always being dragged. Art is the it's what culture is. Without art, you don't really have culture. You have mathematics, you have some science, you have some politics and whatnot. But the real engine of culture is art. And art is always dragging the other 99% of the uncultured idiots by the back of their hair, like a caveman to his wife, into the future. whether they realize it or not.